Greetings. Welcome to This, That, and the Other, where I react to, respond to, comment on, question, or otherwise propound on whatever I find of interest on any given day. Now, today's topic Hi! I thought I'd come out and relax in the living room for a while instead of being cooped up in the studio. At first, I toyed with the idea of subtitling this epilogue as Peter Jackson, Saint or Sinner. A moment's reflection, of course, provided the answer, yes. Being human, he is, of course, some of each. But let's keep that phrase as a guide. And by the way, I will be using the singular words book and film or movie. That's how it was originally written, and that's how it was filmed. Now, Saint definitely applies at the very beginning. Getting this film produced definitely comes under the heading of miracle. Getting a single movie greenlit by the buttheads in Hollywood is amazing enough, but three together and such a complex story, it took 5 years to finally convince someone to do something. Now the credits clearly state, based on the book by J.R.R. Tolkien. Based on, not a faithfully accurate representation of. Which brings up the matter of adaptation. Now, what exactly is an adaptation? The simplest meaning is the conversion of material from one format to another, like book to film, or vice versa. The problems arise when deciding how accurate the translation should be. A film adapted from a book will largely depend on who's doing the adapting. The film's director is going to have a different point of view than the book's author. And an independent screenwriter may not satisfy either. And how much do audience expectations count? That, in a nutshell, is what we're dealing with looking at The Lord of the Rings. The director did the adaptation, so we should expect most decisions to be made based primarily on visual appeal. Backstory, exposition, character development, and all that are bound to take a backseat. Peter Jackson has a number of modes or methods of adaptation. Now, pay attention, there'll be a quiz. Number 1. Take the scene, cut it into phrases and sentences, and mix them all up. 1A, do the same, but add a big fight. Now, 2A is same as number 1, but also make a handful of somewhat minor changes for no apparent reason, other than to impress your fingerprints on the final product. 2B, make larger changes to shorten the scene to make room for new scenes you've added yourself. And 2C would be make additions to the scene to allow cutting other scenes. And 2D, make additions to the scene for no apparent reason. See 2A. And 2E, make additions to liven up the action. Number 3, totally scrap the source material. Number 4, write a whole new scene of your own. Number 5, combine 3 and 4. In other words, replace an original source scene with a newly written one. 6A, keep the original scene, but reassign the dialogue to different characters, even if they need to be introduced into the scene. 6B, keep the original scene, but rewrite the dialogue. And 6C, include dialogue that was originally somewhere else. Number 7, keep the scene, but change a major character. Thankfully, he only did that once. And 8, relocate the scene on the timeline. Now, some of these have some justification in certain instances, but not to the extent that Jackson uses them. And that doesn't even cover changing characters' personalities and motivations. Mainly Faramir, Denethor, and Saruman, to various degrees. I guesstimate about 90% of the film is covered by at least one of those methods. And the other 10% is paraphrasing. Good luck finding anything in the film that is faithfully represents anything Tolkien actually wrote. So let's look at the film. Now, this commentary is based on the extended editions. If all you've seen are theatrical releases, you're missing half the story, and none of the following will make much sense. The prologue, the first prologue anyway, is all backstory and is 100% necessary to understanding anything that happens in the film. It's a shame that many viewers, i.e. reactors, don't pay enough attention to it. Either that or a few hours later they've forgotten much of it and are asking questions about who's who and what's what and why this and that. Now, this doesn't exist as such in the book, but rather is a collection of information gathered from throughout the narrative and appendices. Now, this is not only justified, but required. So PJ can keep the halo for a while. The second prologue is from the one in the book, although a lot shorter and much less complete. Now, this is useful backstory exposition of Hobbit culture and society. Some parts of the original are kept, but much is new, and even more is cut. I just wish they would have taken 10 seconds to explain that pipeweed is tobacco. Now, the book covers it in some detail. I've done almost 30 videos breaking the scenes down and commenting on them. It would be ridiculous going through all of them again just to put numbers on everything. But there are a few major items that need to have blame assigned. Now, Jackson also likes to warp the timeline. For instance, Gandalf did not leave the night of the party, but a few days later, and much less dramatically. And he was gone for the better part of 17 years, with only a few brief visits to the Shire. Now, during this period, he indeed visited the Minas Tirith archives, although the reader wasn't informed of it until the Council of Elrond much later. Gandalf and Saruman's discussion may have happened about the same time. But again, the reader is not informed of it until the Council of Elrond in the book. And the actual confrontation was largely Mode 5, with a modicum of number 2A thrown in, and strictly vocal. There was no actual fight. The eagle escape was also number 5. Once we crossed the Brandywine River, we cut 3 chapters totaling about 40 pages. Now, the Old Forest chapter is partial foreshadowing of Fanghorn, and the Old Man Willow sequence is relocated to that scene. Tom Bombadil is, well, he's Tom Bombadil. No one has ever come up with an adequate explanation of him, although there's no shortage of theories. But with the professor and Christopher both gone to the halls of Mandos, we will never know. And the Barrow Downs explains where the hobbits' swords came from. Aragorn did not just happen to have them lying around. Bree is a bit of everything, except 7 and 8, including a cameo by Peter Jackson. The hike through the wild is mainly number 5. Weathertop is also mostly number 5, with that one glaring number 7 exception. Yes, an elf came to render aid, but it was not Arwen. And the dash to the ford is number 2E. Even if you accept Arwen, everything she was portrayed as doing was number 4. All her mysticism is total nonsense. Peter's halo is slipping and little horns are starting to appear. Actually, Arwen makes only 2 appearances in the entire 1,000-page book. One is a 2-paragraph description, no action or dialogue, halfway through this next chapter. And the other is 3 short paragraphs with a small amount of dialogue, 3/4 of the way through The Return of the King. Now, most of this chapter is cut, except for being reunited with Bilbo. The Council of Elrond is one of the most important events of the story. In the movie, it is completely presented using all the modes except 7 and 8. It even manages to use number 3, number 4, and number 5. It is possible to have additions that do not directly replace deletions, and some that do. As an aside, the term fellowship is never used in the first volume of the book, despite the title. And Saruman makes no actual appearance until the parley at the base of Orthanc, which is halfway through the Two Towers book or near the beginning of the Return of the King movie. Any other scene containing Saruman up until now, or Arwen at any time, is totally made up by Jackson. His sinner side is getting stronger. Caradhras and the Mines of Moria, again, consist of all modes except 7 and 8. This is getting tiresome, saying the same things over and over. There are a few things, though, that I do want to emphasize, but I have the same things to say about them. The Ents going to war is 2D, 5, 8, plus totally reversing the decision they made. And the entire Treebeard sequence is 5 and 8. The whole Lothlorien episode is 2A, 2D, 5, and 6A. Faramir's capture of Frodo and Sam is 2D, some 3, and 4. And anything and everything about Osgiliath is 4. Total Jackson invention. The Shelob sequence, 2A, 2D, partial 5. Wholesale trashing of the entire end of the book, 2D, 3, and a small amount of 5 at the very end. And even poor Gone Very Gone, 5. Every other scene, bits and pieces of one or more of all modes except 7. The halo is gone. The horns are full length. Sorry, Peter. Sinner wins. And I'll repeat what I said at the beginning. The credits clearly state, based on the book by J.R.R. Tolkien. Based on, not a faithfully accurate representation. Simply put, we're dealing with two different stories. J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. Now, as far as I'm concerned, Jackson used Tolkien's work only as a skeleton to hang his own flesh on. I don't feel Jackson really had much respect for Tolkien's work, except as a quarry. Now, at best, the movie's a large paraphrase. On the average, it's a total rewrite. But I'm willing to compromise to an extent. If you want Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, this is an awesome film, deserving of all the accolades it's earned. But if you want a film version of J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, well, that movie still hasn't been made. And at this point, probably never will be. So, enjoy what we got, even though it's not quite what many of us wanted. It's time to head to the Grey Havens, board that last ship to the undying west, as the sun sets on my sojourn through Middle-earth. I'd like to thank the few people who actually watched any of these videos. I hope they found them interesting, if not actually entertaining. I thoroughly enjoyed making them. In any case, this is the end of the series, though there may still be a couple individual videos peripheral to the mainstream. Take care.